Welcome to the Podkey summary of Meet the New MetricKit from WWDC 2026. Apple gave MetricKit a pretty major overhaul in iOS 27, and this one matters if you care about app performance in the real world, not just in a lab. The big shift is a Swift-first API, richer diagnostics, and a new way to tie performance data to what the app was actually doing at the time. So instead of just seeing that something was slow or memory-heavy, developers can get much closer to why, where, and under which app state it happened. In iOS 27, MetricKit was rebuilt from the ground up with a modern Swift-first API, replacing the older MX Metric Manager setup. That sounds like a developer quality of life update, and it is, but it also has a practical consequence. The new API is now the only way to reach the more advanced features. That includes contextual metrics, deeper memory diagnostics, and the new metal frame rate signal. So, if teams want the good stuff, this is the path. The most interesting addition is the state reporting framework, which lets developers define custom app states and have MetricKit intersect performance data with those states. A simple example is tracking which tab is active. So instead of one blended performance number for the whole app, you can see how the Home tab behaves versus Search or Settings. And it goes further than one dimension at a time. States are scoped to domains, which means a team can report separate dimensions like tab location and batch size at the same time. That domain model is useful because it avoids the awkward start and end pairing style. You define stable state values, and MetricKit can line them up with the metrics it collects. There is a little discipline required here because state design can get messy fast. The recommendation is to keep domains narrow, so each app area or concern has its own state instead of one giant bucket trying to describe everything. And those state transitions should reflect stable phases, not every tiny UI twitch a person triggers with their thumb. If teams over-segment, they end up with data that's too granular to interpret cleanly, and they can also run into upper limits. So this is one of those more detail is not always more insight situations. Apple's advice before shipping is pretty sensible. Validate these reported states with the points of interest instrument.
Basically, make sure the states MetricKit thinks are happening actually line up with what the app is doing.
Because contextual data is only helpful if it's accurate. Bad labels just give you very confident confusion later. For game developers, iOS 27 adds a dedicated metal frame rate metric. That gives a direct read on render performance alongside the CPU and GPU metrics teams already use, which makes frame pacing issues easier to isolate. It's a cleaner signal for the question players actually feel, which is whether the game is running smoothly. MetricKit also reports total hang time, which is another nice step toward measuring responsiveness in a way people experience it. So if an app accumulates 3 seconds of hang time over a 30-minute session, and that can be normalized into a hang rate, like 6 seconds per hour, and then compared across devices and over time. That turns vague complaints about the app feeling sticky into something measurable and trendable. Another important addition is detailed memory exception diagnostics. When an app or extension goes over its memory limit and gets terminated, MetricKit can now report what caused that termination with more detail, including backtraces and a termination category. That matters because memory failures are often the kind of bug that shows up as a user disappearing, not as a clean, reproducible crash. If teams can correlate those diagnostics with rising memory metrics, they get a much better shot at spotting a problem before it becomes a full-blown pattern. Launch time reporting also gets more informative because it includes a histogram of launch counts bucketed by duration. So instead of just one average number, developers can see where launches usually land, maybe around 510 to 540 milliseconds, and also spot the ugly outliers. That helps answer a really practical question. Are a few bad launches dragging the average up, or is there a broader systematic latency issue? Averages are polite. Histograms tend to tell you what actually happened. On the reporting side, MetricKit delivers a full-day aggregated entry, plus smaller interval entries that cover shorter windows of a few hours. Those interval reports only show up when there are metrics for that period, which keeps things cleaner. Inside each interval, The data is grouped into familiar areas like CPU, memory, display, and GPU, so teams can filter by the performance domain they care about without digging through everything at once. One of the more practical parts of this update is that metric reports and diagnostic reports are codable. That makes it easy to encode them as JSON and send them to a backend where the really useful work starts. Once performance data is aggregated across devices, teams can establish baselines, detect regressions, and decide what optimization work is actually worth prioritizing. That's the difference between reacting to one weird test phone and understanding what your user base is living with. Taken together, this update makes MetricKit feel a lot more like a performance analysis system and a lot less like a passive stats dump. The theme across all of it is context. What state the app was in, how smooth it felt, where memory went sideways, and whether a slowdown was normal or part of a pattern. And honestly, if your app is going to misbehave, the least it can do is leave better notes. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.